You're listening to Extinction Radio FM. Listen to the podcast at extinctionradio.com.
See, the big danger is that the big danger is that the human-caused emissions carry us beyond this threshold or point at which the emissions from the planet, from the permafrost, from the ocean sediments, from the oceans themselves as they warm, if the sink capability decreases and the sink capability of the Amazon rainforest decreases. So, if the emissions start coming out in a big way, that from the planet, right, being triggered, if you like, by the human emissions, then it's going to be really touch and go whether we can do much. But I still think that with the money going into it, I find it hard to believe that if the military budgets of the world went into addressing abrupt climate change, that we wouldn't have enough impact to bring us back across the threshold to stability. It's certainly not. It's certainly a new ball game, right? Yeah. Because we haven't had, in the past when there were abrupt changes, there was no feedback like humanity to change the outcome. Right. So
yeah.
So that's one of the things that I almost sometimes I feel like it's like that old the old movie with Ebenezer Scrooge. It's called The Christmas Carol.
Yeah.
I don't know if you know that Christmas story. I mean, Scrooge is humanity, and we have the ghost of climate past talking about what we had. We have the ghost of climate present saying things are very dire. And I feel like I'm taking the role of ghost of climate future, letting people know what can happen. I think Guy McPherson and others are doing a lot of that, but I do think that it is what may be if it's not necessarily what will be. I think that the weight of humans, the money, the resources, the technology went. The biggest hurdle is to overcome the political lethargy, the denialism, and I think. But unfortunately, I don't think that people screaming about it now is going to push the planet over this human tipping point.
Do you have any final observations you'd like to make, Mern?
Actually, I just one thing, based on what Paul's been saying about the situation that we find ourselves in now, and the geoengineering solutions, right, that are available to us possibly. We have a governance problem, which I think you were sort of pointing to, Paul, when you were saying political will, right? And
yes.
You pointed out that, David Keith feels like he's ready to go. He's ready to get started right now. He's been funded by Bill Gates all along. But there's a big problem with anybody stepping up to the plate and just getting started. Because my understanding is that there will be fallout effects from geoengineering. Some of them will likely be positive in terms of cooling the planet. But all of the evidence I've seen is that there could be knockoff effects. Everybody's concerned about the knockoff effects. They don't know where they're going to happen, and they don't know when.
Yes.
And so there's tremendous concern if, for example, the U.S. decides unilaterally to go ahead with a geoengineering scheme.
Yes, absolutely.
What happens if the very next year a catastrophic drought comes down in China? Mm-hmm. For example, it could be connected, it might not be connected, but
yes.
Mightn't the Chinese assume it's connected? I mean, these sort of political problems around it, and also the fact that with solar radiation management, we need to be doing that for thousands of years or until we've sucked the excess carbon out of the atmosphere until we're down to probably 280, right?
Yes. You're right. I mean, these are
concern. These political issues are a great concern. I think you were gesturing to them. If you could say a little more about that, I'd appreciate it.
Yeah. This is I think, a whole new discussion in itself, and I'd like to have Paul back on again.
Okay. Well, let me just say one thing.
Okay, Paul. Okay.
Quickly.
Yeah.
And that is, you have to look at the drought in California, which could be a mega drought. 40 million people in the state. There may have to be a huge exodus out of California. Probably a lot of people up to Canada where there's water. This is happening. We have geoengineered the planet with our fossil fuel emissions. We're deep in there thick in. I mean, anthropogenic climate change is inadvertent geoengineering. Okay, we've done this already. So to argue that so the idea of doing it, of doing it in a the idea of implementing things like CDR, I mean, I don't think there's a lot of complaints about CDR. It's all about the solar radiation management. So you have to really look at the what happens if you don't do anything versus what happens if you do cool the Arctic, right? Now, it's pretty clear that if you don't do anything, the impacts on the entire planet, the economy, civilizations, everything, is going to get very, very uncomfortable and chaotic. And so if you do something and cause something, I mean, so I don't know. You just need to look at both sides of the coin. The problem is we don't have an alternate universe where we can do the geoengineering in one case and not do anything in the other case, right? So whatever we do, so that's one of the issues. But I would argue that the Arctic amplification is the cause of the problem. It's the reason why instability in the climate system is occurring much faster than any climatologist or the public would have expected just a few years ago. We know that we can, cool it. So if we do it, I would argue that we should go back to, a more stable climate that we had before, just, from top level down logic. And I don't see how one can argue against that. There's still going to be incidents occurring around the world. I mean, back when we had a more stable climate, there were still floods and droughts and torrential rain events and things like that at various places around the planet. But it's the frequency of occurrence of them. So then this becomes a statistical thing, right? Is the frequency of occurrence, the severity, the duration of these extreme weather events around the planet, is that decreasing, with what we're doing with cooling the Arctic? And I would argue we're going to see a very clear signal that it will decrease.
I'm now accepting the reality of the surreal.